Hello everyone, and welcome to the 9th internally screening Hooptober episode, where we will be reviewing A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, directed by Anna Lily Amirpour, who is an American-English Iranian director. We kind of cheated because this is to fulfill the country's tag. I thought it was an Iranian film, as it's in Persian and stars mostly Iranian people, I believe, but it was actually shot in California, so somewhat cheating, but it's still kind of an Iranian film, so we'll go with it. It's a vampire western coming-of-age medley film shot in black and white for a minuscule budget. I believe it was mostly funded from an Indiegogo campaign, and for a sort of student slash very indie type film, I was pretty impressed with just how high quality this was as a product, and I enjoyed it a fair bit. Adam, what did you think of A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night?
Well, I would be remiss if I wasn't gonna first mention just how beautiful this film is. Like, this film is just impressively gorgeous to look at, especially when you learn, like we learned sort of halfway through watching this, how cheap it was made for, and we were kind of taken aback because
I was just like, how
have you done this? The lighting is impeccable, the shot composition, cinematography is all excellent, a lot of static shots, a lot of like very pristine symmetrical shots. It's just very lovely to look at, and they really nail the black and white. Like, however they've done that is so gorgeous. We commented while we were watching that this film can get it right for 55 grand or something like that, and Mank can't get it right for however many millions was spent on that film.
Yeah.
The performances were excellent as well, particularly from our lead, the eponymous girl, played by Sheila Vand. I don't know a film to have combined the kind of, I guess, like moody, emo-y, grungy pixie girl aesthetic with vampirism before. It's like very specific. I guess it kind of lends itself to the kind of student film vibe of the whole thing. But if we're gonna say student film, you have to say how separate in terms of quality this is from what you would usually think of when the word student film come into your head.
Yeah.
Our main male protagonist as well, played by Arish Morandi. They have a great like on-screen chemistry. I will say their meeting is kind of unusual. Like, he's just like on his way home from a party and he's like wasted out of his mind, and he just bumps into a vampire and like they form a romance then and there.
I hate it when that happens.
I mean, if only like more cute goth girls could, take pity on me in the middle of the night when I'm feeling low. But whatever, it's like life isn't a movie. But anyway, they have incredible chemistry together, and there's a lot of moments where there's no dialogue in the film. So you're really relying on the actors having this good sort of body language and sort of unspoken bond with one another, which it gets really right. Also, I can't forget, this film has one of the most well-behaved and beautiful little cats in it.
True.
And I feel that gets a lot of top marks from people on Letterboxd. From the reviews I've seen, people are mostly praising the cat. If that's what you need to give you a 10 out of 10, then by all means, it was a beautiful, adorable little cat. I have some reservations about this film, but I will hold off for now. Rupert, do you agree?
I agree. The film is just stunningly beautiful. Like, the amount of depth and blacks and the whites in this film are like really beautifully, starkly contrasted. It just looks absolutely gorgeous. If you can watch this on like the highest definition thing you can get a hold of. Yeah, as you said, the shot composition is really good as well. It has lots of those beautiful like symmetrical shots with the space in the frame being like really cleverly used. Some like really good use of kind of creepy steady cam as well in some of the stalking scenes. So it's all quite effective in that way. And the way characters are framed always makes sense within the context of the scene. There's a great scene early on in the film where you have a sleazy character doing something sleazy. The way the scene evolves, the camera is eventually pointing down on him a bit, and the vampire is sort of looming above him,
like
the
elevated.
Way it's shot.
Yeah,
it looks really great. The performances across the board, I didn't have a single performance in this I was unhappy with. I do have some reservations about the film also, but I wanted to highlight a few things that I really liked. I thought by far the best scene in the film, because I was kind of taken aback by how unhorror-ish this was.
Yes.
It's really, really way more of a teen romance / coming of age film. But the best scene in the film for me was the scene where the kid is out alone at night and the
yes.
vampire confronts him. Basically just seems to be toying with him for fun almost, and has this genuinely quite terrifying monologue at him, asking him if he's a good boy over and over again. That was genuinely quite unnerving, and also a very satisfying scene with the drug dealer. I won't spoil it, but that doesn't go too well for him, and that was great to watch. This film has like a very kind of wonderfully sexual atmosphere to it, which makes sense because vampires have always been these kind of sexual beings. That's kind of what they've been supposed to represent, right?
Yeah, it's like a fundamental aspect of like the fear of like, I guess, like foreign influence corrupting the innocent chastity of English women. In the original Dracula. Yeah, it really definitely works on that front. I mean, you're biting someone's neck, it's always going to be a bit sexual. But obviously, I think the social commentary this film is offering, the fashion style in the film is very reminiscent of, if you ever go back and you watch footage of 50s or 60s Iran, when it was a more sort of cosmopolitan, almost a little bit secular country, with quite sort of retro fashionable outfits and stuff that you see all the time today with generic hipster girls and boys out in London wearing this kind of stuff. Right,
and it's clearly applying that sexual feminist commentary in that context. The film is almost like a little bit magical-realist in terms of its setting, because it's never really clear where it is. They talk about they live in Bad City, and it's clearly this weird mix of America and I guess somewhere in Iran. I can't say for sure. And there's like a footage at the beginning of the film playing on the TV of some very strict Islamic preacher talking about the woman's role in society, so that it obviously plays a large part in the commentary. And obviously just the imagery of this vampire wearing a hijab, it's clearly quite evocative with this kind of sexual tension under it. I'm not 100% sure what the message of the film is. I'm not obviously that culturally familiar, but I found it very interesting, and there's definitely almost certainly some very interesting interpretations. And I guess to move on to complaints about the film, my main issue was generally that it could have done with a little bit more horror, as I alluded to earlier.
For sure.
Because when the violence is offered up by this film, it's very satisfying. But there's only really like maybe 4 or 5 instances of like really satisfying violence in the film.
Yeah.
And the violence you get is great. I really appreciate it, for example, when she bares her vampire fangs, you actually see the fangs kind of pop down. It makes this kind of horrifying noise, which for an indie film I just thought was really impressive, because even mainstream films often do that badly, try and cut around it. And I thought the pacing suffered here and there just for being a little slow. And what were your issues with the film?
Well, I definitely echo you pretty much all points. The horror stuff tends to come early. Like the most horrifying scene we get in terms of gore and visceral action, I guess, is that drug dealer scene, and we get this flavor for what we think is going to come, and the film then takes its turn to be more of a romantic drama. And that was quite sort of anticlimactic for me, because when you present basically the scariest moment of the film at the beginning, you kind of lose a lot of that sense of tension and satisfaction throughout the rest of it. And whilst you do get, she sucks the blood of other people throughout, it's a lot more restrained later, in a kind of, not in a dull way, but just not in as exciting a way as has been presented earlier to you. I'm completely with you though on the kid being tormented scene. Easily my favourite scene of the whole film. But what you said about the subtext and like the kind of not really knowing what the film was about, I would say the film's greatest issue is I think it's quite pretentious, in that I don't think the film really knows what it's trying to say at all. Or if it is trying to say something, it's buried it under, I guess, levels of aesthetic to a point where it kind of loses it in translation, if you know what I mean.
Maybe. I mean, the main thing I was thinking is that this is some kind of commentary. It must be quite a personal film for the director. I mean, I might be reading into this. The way I took it is that it's clearly about her dual identity, like the whole mashed up setting being like this weird mix of California and Iran. I don't know how much time she spent in Iran or California, respectively. And then obviously the contrast of the sort of anti-hero of the film being this vampire girl who is simultaneously a Muslim girl who wears a hijab, but also has a boyfriend and is going out and killing people and sucking their blood. It's clearly a film about like contrast, right? That's how I took it. I don't think it was without a message. I just think it could have certainly been clearer, but I don't think it was without a message.
Well, if it's not without a message, then I think its message is not handled with the sort of care that the aesthetic is handled with. You know, the lack of dialogue in many scenes, particularly the ending, which I found quite frustrating. It leaves a lot up to the audience to fill in as to what's going on, but perhaps too much. It gave me the impression of there were scenes I thought were a bit vacuous, that were a bit kind of style over substance, particularly that ending. That quite frustrated me. Just the amount of silence between these two characters in such a pivotal moment
I didn't hate
was
the
patience testing for me.
I didn't hate it. I thought it certainly could have been better, but the reveal that happens I thought was quite great, and I did feel like a level of tension in it. It certainly is maybe a little too dragged out.
Yeah.
But I didn't hate it.
Dragged out with still minimal reward. The driving off into the sunset as it was.
I guess it is a
little cliched for a film that feels like it's trying to do something different and unique. It ends up being quite formulaic in its kind of the romantic side of things.
Yeah, I guess. The romance, it could have certainly been better, but there are some great scenes with it. The scene where they're in their bedroom together is great.
Yeah.
With the song playing on the radio. And it's almost I can't remember if it was actually in slow motion or not. It was a kind of very slow scene of just that moment of intimacy that didn't really need any dialogue.
Yeah, I agree. That was nice, and the unspoken sexual tension that's done is handled in quite a mature but also idealistic way. If I were to imagine the perfect romance, here it is. I think the film is real physical contact at all, just people being close to one another.
Yeah, I do think the film is trying to play with a certain level of cliche, because it's referencing all this nostalgic stuff. Like the guy Arash, he's got this leather jacket. He looks almost like an extra
greaser
from Grease or something. Yeah. And he drives this 1950s car, and it's clearly trying to evoke some kind of classic Hollywood feeling in this kind of weird mismatched setting.
Right.
Which I did find quite interesting. But I think, my main criticism of the film would be that mostly, pacing-wise, meandering. When at the end it does try and snap back to having a bit more plot, it feels a bit sudden and not necessarily... And then, then you have that final climax, and then it just kind of... The pacing feels like it's jumping about maybe a bit too much, and it just doesn't quite mesh together quite well. It's something quite hard to quantify, but when you watch it, you do feel it a bit. And I would agree, it's certainly style over substance, which is a problem, but it's not too much of a problem for me, because I do like stylish films, and I think the style is for the most part strong enough to overcome the lack of substance. But there is certainly a lack of substance. I would agree with you to some extent.
I just think overall for me, this film works so much better as a piece of visual art than it does something I would watch for its engaging story. I think maybe with a few more visceral, gory or horrifying moments, that tension would have been kind of maintained better, and the film would have felt better paced rather than kind of being a bit front heavy. That kind of eases into a much slower pace. But I can't fault it for its looks. It is genuinely one of the prettiest films I've seen, and for such a small budget, it's unbelievable how they've.
It's got a good soundtrack too.
It does have a good soundtrack, yeah.
So what would you rate this film, Adam?
I think I'd give this a 6 out of 10. I think it was somewhat frustrating. I don't know how eager I am to return to it, but I can't praise it enough for being one of the most visually interesting sort of storytelling films I've seen in a long time. I just wish the story underpinning all of that was given more of a chance to explore some of its finer details and really go into depth about the stuff you were talking about, like dual identity, people wanting to escape their situation, a country in turmoil, the taboos of Iranian culture, which this film was clearly... I don't know if it was the main reason why they filmed it in America, but this film is so taboo that there was no way they could have filmed it in Iran.
Yeah. I think I like this a bit more than you. I'm going to give this a 7 because I do share some of your frustrations in terms of the story, but I do think that the two main characters are very well fleshed out, and I enjoyed them. And the aesthetic and the photography of the film is so gorgeous. Even with my frustrations in the story, there were moments in the story that were I just thought really excellent. It certainly could have maybe done with, I don't know, another draft of the script, cutting some stuff out, adding some more stuff in. It's also just like a very unique feeling film. I feel like I can remember quite a lot of it. It offers like a kind of, yeah, it may be pretentious, but the feeling, the vibe of the film is just, it's very unique. I don't think I've ever seen a film that's quite like it. It's such a strange blend of feelings, this film. So yeah, if you're a vampire nerd, or you just really like pretty looking black and white films, or if you're a film student at university, this is the fucking film for you.
Oh yeah,
I could recommend this. If your favorite film is Perks of Being a Wallflower, but you're ready to go for something a bit edgier, watch this film. You will love it.
That's a really good shout. That's a very
or
good
like
shout.
You know, if you love Scott Pilgrim, I reckon, but you like horror films too, this could be for you. So yeah, that's been our review of A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. A tentative recommendation from Adam and a slightly less tentative recommendation from myself. But yeah, that has been our review of it. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. If you dislike it, give it a dislike. We've been eternally screening. We will have more Hooptober reviews coming out soon. Check the Hooptober list in the description and see what might be coming up next. I've been Rupert.
I've been Adam.
And we will see you in the next one tomorrow. Peace.